Extending GI Bill benefits to Vietnam vets is the goal of the VFW as the fighting in that country goes from a small conflict to a major war. In 1966, they achieved this goal.
Meeting the interest and needs of its ever-growing number of members, the VFW institutes an insurance department, a Light-a-Bike program for children, a defensive driving program, a congressional award program to honor outstanding senators and representatives, and late in the decade, a life insurance program.
Almost daily, the number of troops in Vietnam increases, and the VFW keeps in touch with them through gift packages, cards, and letters. And when they return, many of these new veterans join the VFW. 1966, membership reaches 1,320,029.
Late in the decade, anti-war protesters appear all over the country, and many of them burn the flag.
At VFW urging, Congress passes a law making it a crime to desecrate the American flag.
(1970). The VFW starts this year with 1,585,736 members.
In October, Congress approves a Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, thereby giving the veteran a voice in both houses of Congress.
As the war in Vietnam winds down and more veterans return, the VFW begins a study of the poor care being given in VA hospitals.
And when the Vietnam War comes to an end at 8 o'clock in the morning of January 28, 1973, and the POWs come home, the VFW asks for an accounting of the ones who did not return.
1974, the VFW celebrates its 75th anniversary, and the government prints a postage stamp to carry the message around the world.
In 1976, the word is bicentennial, and the Voice of Democracy theme is What Our Bicentennial Heritage Means to Me. The national winner, Joan Eileen Larson of Oregon.
It is also the year in which Congress tries to eliminate the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. The VFW fights back. How they fought is best described by the 1976-1977 VFW Commander-in-Chief, R.D. Bulldog Smith of Georgia.
In the first blizzard of the year they came, from Alaska, Hawaii, and everywhere they came, wearing VFW hats. 3,000 of them trudged up and down Capitol Hill, carrying to their representatives their message. It was the small man speaking out, and every representative knew it.
The committee was saved, and in 1979 held its first joint meeting with the House Veterans Affairs Committee, as requested by the VFW.
The 70s also saw the VFW drug awareness program initiated, and women veterans admitted to the VFW.
Though the war is over, the problems of Vietnam vets continue to be a high priority with the VFW. The 1979-1980 Commander-in-Chief, Howard E. Vander Kloot Jr., summed it up in these words.
Vietnam produced the most crippling disabilities, both physical and mental, of any conflict to date. Between 1962 and 1979, the veterans' population has increased by 8 million, while hospital beds have been reduced by 34,800. We have submitted 6 cases of veterans who have died or almost died after having been refused treatment.
Addressing the needs of all veterans, the VFW began the decade of the 80s by asking for increased research into one of the biggest problems of the Vietnam War, the effects of Agent Orange.
Compensation for veterans affected by atomic radiation at the end of World War II and in the nuclear testing that followed.
And increased attention to the problems of aging veterans.
It soon became a decade in which major VFW goals were attained. An Assistant Secretary of Labor for Veterans Employment and Training.
Increased POW MIA benefits.
A VA home loan increase.
Elevation of the Veterans Administration to the President's Cabinet.
Small but brutal conflicts marked the decade of the 80s. And in every one of them, Americans served, Americans died, and Americans came home wounded.
Iran.
Lebanon,
Honduras,
Libya,
El Salvador.
Grenada.
In 1984, VFW membership hits 2 million and over 200 new VFW posts are mustered.
1985. This year's Commander-in-Chief is Billy Ray Cameron of North Carolina, the first Vietnam veteran to hold the position.
Sponsorship of the Special Olympics was undertaken, and the VFW contributed to the building of memorials to those who served and those who died in service.
Vietnam Veterans Memorial,
Vietnam Women's Memorial,
Korean War Memorial.
1989, the Berlin Wall comes down, communism collapses, and the Cold War comes to an end. America is now the only world power, and it falls to the Americans to maintain the peace so many have fought and died for since the beginning of the century.
As the VFW reaches its 10th decade, its strength, power, and influence allows it to lead the way in veterans affairs. Before the decade is out, it will be listed by Fortune magazine as the 16th most effective membership organization in America, with no other veterans group ahead of it.
The decade of the 90s begins with a major victory for the VFW, service connection for specific conditions caused by Agent Orange.
In August of 1990, war clouds rise over the Mideast. President Bush asked for VFW support for what lies ahead. He receives it.
Before the first troops have even left America, the VFW is gearing up for a major troop support program, Operation Hometown. Over 100,000 packages will soon reach the troops deployed in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
Victory is achieved on February 27th. Kuwait is freed, and American troops begin the journey home.
Across America, the VFW is there to greet them in Operation Homecoming.
The cost to free Kuwait is 265 dead, 357 wounded.
Those who return from the Desert War bring medical problems never seen before. The VFW asked for an investigation.
In 1992, President Bush sends American troops to Somalia, and in 1994, President Clinton brings them home. 44 are killed, 175 wounded, but nothing is gained.